let's get right into it, folks. Ken Klippenstein has a piece here that I think kind of summarizes the main headline people are taking away from today. And does that not show up? I'm
No, it's
going to
not
have to
showing
share
up.
that. That's
I
crazy.
can get it up
Okay,
first.
I got it here. He says, dying congressman to lead watchdog committee. The gerontocracy wins again. And look, that's certainly one of the glaring issues with this. 74-year-old congressman stricken with an especially deadly form of cancer was chosen to be the top Democrat in charge of oversight, a watchdog role that will oversee investigations into public corruption and wrongdoing over the next 2 years. Now, what's interesting to me there in this thing with him besting AOC, as Nancy Pelosi calls in favors after a hip replacement, not metaphorical. She's literally fell and broke her hip, and then called in favors so that this vote would go this way to this guy with cancer. That's a probable terminal form of cancer. There's a few, so like everyone's focusing on the gerontocratic angle of it, and I'll say like there's another um tweet here by I can't share those, that's really
Yeah,
annoying.
it's your green screen. Yeah.
But that's all right, I can still present. But Dan Pfeiffer here, he said valuing seniority over political messaging chops is exactly how Democrats got into this mess in the first place. And I'll just say, like, I don't think that this is really what this is about. This isn't about Democrats just loving seniority, because if you'll remember, or maybe people don't, but this was the last chair of that. It was a guy named Jamie Raskin. And just read a little bit of this here. Raskin gets top Democratic slot on U.S. House Oversight Committee. That's December 22nd, if you can remember, way back into December 22nd, 2022. I am truly humbled and honored beyond measure to be elected ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, Raskin said. Blah, blah, blah. To win the post, Raskin leapfrogged two more senior members on the panel who were also seeking the top Democratic slot, Connolly and Massachusetts Representative Stephen Lynch. Lynch withdrew from the race earlier this week after receiving just 7 votes in the steering committee tally. Raskin picked up 30 votes there, and Connolly got 19. So, this whole notion that this is about seniority, well, it wasn't last time. They wanted to get the guy who they thought was really good at taking it to Trump over corruption, and they just said, we're going to put you over Connolly. They didn't do that this time. That's a choice. That's a political choice that isn't process. Um, some things I think I would just point out are the differences in the district represented here. Obviously similar populations. Poverty rate is quite a big disparity. You'll be surprised that Jerry Connolly's district is a much lower poverty rate than AOC's at 5.2% versus 18.3%. Also, the median household income, as property values are pretty much same. It's very expensive to own property in New York, so about 600,000 to about 665,000. But median household income is double.
Yeah.
Connolly's at 150,000 and AOC's at 65. So that is, I think, the big things that are going on, or the sort of underlying dynamics here. That again, a party that has saw Cory Bush and Jamal Bowman, two of the lower income representatives, removed from Congress and replaced by more suburban friendly representatives. This is a gentrifying party.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way to put it, Matt. And I mean, look, there's some strategic things we can get to in just a second, particularly with AOC. But I'll just say that like this also really exposes, I think, a fundamental rot within the Democratic Party. Right? We can get really into the weeds about like social strategy and all this kind of stuff, but it is a party that is just so hostile to grassroots energy, to new folks. And I'm not just talking about like the leadership. I'm sure this is similar in states all across the country, but I know here in Texas, where that's not even the party in power, people who go and try to join their local county Democratic Party in rural Texas tell me this all the time. We showed up at a meeting that had 15 people in it. They were all old, and they did everything that they could to sort of prevent us for participating and bringing new energy and new ideas into the party, right? So like there's certainly an age thing, but I think you can lose yourself in the age aspect of it as well and forget that there's like a structural aspect to the Democratic Party that doesn't want people who might shake things up a little bit, who might start challenging and asking questions about like, hey, yeah, why does it seem that so much of our party's priorities seem to be written by and for the interests of the elite and the hyper wealthy in this country? Right? It's just something that they're so allergic to this basic kind of democratic accountability.
Yeah, and just a few other things to note about Connolly. Co-sponsored PayGo in 2010 with, I believe, Nancy Pelosi saying we need to balance this damn budget. And we need to stop talking about all these people getting thrown, all the people thrown out of their homes, and they were concerned with balancing the United States budget. These Democrats were.
Mhm.
So thanks for that, and all the electoral dividends that's played out. Oh, another thing. This is an article from all of 4 years ago. Uh, the members of Congress who profit from war. Here are some senators. Let's just scroll down, shall we? Let's go past the senators and into the representatives. Okay, here we go. What's the second name we see there? So it's the top name, Steve Cohen from Tennessee,
Mhm.
400,000 from Northrop Grumman. Number two, we got our boy Jerry Connolly. Would you look at that?
Interesting.
Also, both the top three Democrats, even our boy Ro Khanna there. Hey, Ro. Uh, so that's an interesting third name there. But let's just stick with Jerry Connolly here. House Oversight and Reform Committee Operations Subcommittee Chairman Rep Connolly. So he's been there for a while. Is it good that a guy on the Oversight Committee is taking a lot of money from military contractors? Owns as much as $400,000 worth of stock in Leidos, which is paid billions of dollars to provide information services for the Defense Department. In May 2019, Leidos CEO Roger Crone testified before Connolly's committee. Oh, nice.
Nice.
In favor of legislation calling on the government to guarantee back pay for contractors in the wake of government shutdowns. So nice constituent service there from our boy Jerry Connolly.
Mm. And remember, like these kind of investments pay dividends, right? A lot of people's conception of like money in politics is sort of like money for votes, right? And certainly, that can happen to a certain extent, but it's also getting information. And like the way that lobbying works in DC is that most of the lobbyists for these big corporations know far in advance when there's any kind of whispering of these industries or certain topics being investigated by Congress, and they call up their boys and they give them the information that they need. They let them know how they're going to do this and what they're going to talk about and all this kind of stuff, right? And yeah, it's probably not a good thing for somebody charged with oversight to be so in bed with these figures.
To be number two in defense
It's
stocks.
crazy. It's crazy. And like this is the thing too, is like, everyone who watches this program, we already know about the horrors of the Republican Party. We don't have to get into that. But the fact of the matter is that you are delusional if you aren't recognizing that the Democratic Party is very beholden to these interests. And in fact, represent a portion of the ruling class and these kind of nasty groups that any kind of left populist, just general pro democracy party in this country would need to come up against if they were to seriously reform the American system, right? A system that across the political spectrum, Americans are all saying it's time for change. You need to take these forces on, and it's just abundantly clear that the Democratic Party is just as bought out as the Republicans are on these issues.
Yeah, and understand in the recrimination when people are saying we're too far left or whatever, they're just defending the Connollys. Like they're just defending the corporate
Yeah.
interest plans that are there. Of course, they need to point the win. AOC, and look again, we've talked plenty at length
Yeah.
with Ryan Grimm most recently about AOC, but she for nonetheless secured votes in a way that a lot of
Mhm.
Democrats can't. And this idea that
And
like
just
they,
sorry, Matt, I just want to be
yeah,
abundantly clear about what you're saying. AOC did better than Kamala Harris in her
yes,
district, right? And as the Democratic Party are losing voters, particularly of certain class position, education, and race in this country, AOC showed a counter argument that the Democrats should have a self interest in maybe learning about why she's doing better than they are.
yep. And you can just look at their districts because that Virginia 11th, not so keen on learning that. that kind of lesson. There's different sorts of, I mean, Lidos,
Yeah.
Lidos in AOC's district.
Well, do we want to talk about the AOC aspect here, Matt? Um,
Yeah. I think you were saying before you had a good take on this. I think a lot of it is kind of in line with what we've been saying with Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Look, I mean, I think there's two big lessons here, and I would actually like to talk a little bit about like the long term strategy after this, but just two quick responses. Is that look? It seems very clearly that all of the kind of political maneuvering that AOC has done, all the kind of public facing maneuvering, not to mention private conversations that she's doing, have not done enough to kind of ingratiate herself with the Democratic Party, right? Again, just on a level of self preservation. We're not even talking about a socialist movement or left movement or anything like that. Just a Democratic Party that might want to, I don't know, win elections and not lose to people like Donald Trump. They should have plenty of interest in putting somebody like AOC in this position, especially at a moment, as you've noted and other people have noted, when they aren't in power. So this is a position that is very much set up to grill nasty figures, to get those kind of social media bites, to get people's, to capture people's interest and, attention towards the Democratic Party, saying, oh, that's a party that's questioning these folks as to why they're doing this or that, right? AOC is very good at that. I'm sorry, Connolly is not. It's just on pure media skill, right? One person is going to look a lot better on camera asking questions to corrupt folks, and one person is not. And they decided to go with the person who's going to be worse at the job, at the symbolic position.
I mean, speak symbolic. He's got esophageal cancer. Like, they're a little bit on the nose here.
So there's just that reality that the Democratic Party doesn't even have like a self-preservation strategy at this point, right? Then there's the other one is that for all of the kind of claims about AOC, CIAOC, or whatever that you hear online, the Democratic Party is definitely afraid of somebody like AOC being put into a position like that because they are afraid of what her politics represent. Now, is this David saying, "Oh, the AOC's politics are my politics"? No, I'm just trying to draw a line so it's clear to people that there still is something there that freaks these people out, which is why they are so committed to squashing it, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I want to talk about the strategic implications, but I think people really do need to understand that within the Democratic Party, they still are definitely afraid of people like AOC, of people like Ilhan Omar, that just like they were afraid of people like Bowman and people like Cory Bush.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, let's talk about the strategic aspect here. As you noted, Matt, and everyone knows because it's been publicized. It's not something that was coming out from, shoe leather reporters, like really getting the scoop. Nancy Pelosi really put her thumb on the scale to make sure that people voted against AOC for this position. Um, and that, I think, more than anything, shows that the strategy of trying to play nice with the Democratic Party, trying to play nice with the Democratic leadership, has just failed. It's failed on so many levels. It's failed even on the individual level of those congressional members who have sort of followed that strategy, right, for their own careers. Like, not even talking about the movement, just for them. It hasn't helped them. They still have the knives out for them. And it's certainly hurt our movement dramatically because it's much harder to make the case, right, to the public about the difference between those people's politics and people's like Connolly and people like Nancy Pelosi and people like Kamala Harris, because you're on TV saying, oh, these people are working hard for you. These people are standing up for your values when they're not. They just are not. And I can get I don't agree with it, but there was a point where like you could at least understand maybe the logic of somebody saying, "Hey, the Democrats and all the money that's the money cannons that are pointed at us, it's a lot for us to take on. So why don't we show them that we can govern with the Democratic Party, that we can be a part of this coalition, and maybe they'll reward us with some parts of the of the coalition, so that we can do this or that for working people." Right. And that was the kind of strategy, particularly the strategy of AOC, once Biden got elected. And I mean, 4 years later, I mean, that section of the Democratic Party is weaker than they've ever been. They haven't gained strength. In fact, that bench has shrunk, not grown. And as we see right here, that even on a position where it would be a win-win for everybody, it really would. Like, it really would, for the Democrats to have somebody like AOC in this position, because as we said, she would do well at it. She would look good on camera. She would ask the right questions, all this kind of stuff, particularly when you're going up against a Trump administration that is going to be doing all these kind of horrible things. It helps to have people associate the Democratic brand with attacking Trump and the corruption that we're sure to be seeing. But they're so deathly afraid of that part of their party, of that part of their coalition, gaining any kind of public strength. And there's no doubt about it that the worry with AOC is that they don't want her to build up her brand, particularly if she wants to run for Senate seat in New York. I mean, we've been talking about this since the beginning of Left Reckoning, Matt, about like how we should, operate in and around people like AOC, people like the Squad. And I think one of the things, as we talk about with Ryan Grimm, that I think is really important for people who are serious about doing politics, who are serious about building an alternative, that, people like AOC really didn't think that they came out of the movement, that in fact, that they were doing the movement's favors when they were talking about them and noting their connections to it, not that they sort of owed something to those movements. And right now, where I think the question is just abundantly and kind of clear as it's ever been, that to do anything in this country to take on the rot that Trump represents, but also to take on the rot that Nancy Pelosi, Kamala Harris, and Joe Biden represent. We will need to have a political organization, political movement that stands on its own 2 feet and is able to point at both of those institutions, as Bernie Sanders said recently. All right, a party, the Democratic Party, that has turned their backs on working people. And I hope I don't hold my breath or anything like that. I would just say, in a better world, people like AOC, I think, would recognize that and take on a more, agitational role towards people in the Democratic Party, because they haven't been rewarded for it. In fact, that they have been
They were
hurt.
rewarded more when they were doing the former.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's sort of where that movement is at, where those politics need to go. And, who knows? We'll see, if Greg Casar, as the new leader of the Progressive Caucus, is able to move some things around. But I'll tell you, structurally, that party is against them. And I think as soon as possible, progressives, and certainly people who consider themselves democratic socialists who are in Congress, need to take the position of take an adversarial position to the leadership of this party, because that party is against working people. It's against Palestinians. And it's also against you. It's also against you, members of Congress. They would like you to lose your seat. They do not want you to succeed.
And how you present that publicly, is one thing, but that should absolutely be the understanding privately among anybody sort of working in that. Like, if there's any sort, if there, I mean, and we can appreciate AOC, running the test so purely because she has given them every opportunity to say, okay, you're in. And they go with a guy with esophageal cancer. Who is, again, like a big military industrial guy. So,
that chapter needs to be over.